That night, as I drove deeper into upstate New York, the fog grew thicker and the road quieter, like the world itself was holding its breath. I've always been drawn to forgotten places, but something about these towns felt different. The air carried stories, whispers of people who once laughed, cried, and vanished into time. I wasn't there to chase ghosts, I just wanted to feel what they left behind. But the deeper I went, the stronger that feeling grew, like the past wasn't done speaking, and I was about to hear every word. If you enjoy exploring real haunted places and forgotten stories like this, make sure to subscribe, there's so much more waiting in the dark. 1. Bannerman Castle, the Island of Lost Soldiers. I still remember the first time I saw Bannerman Castle, rising like a ghost from the Hudson River. It was early morning, fog hanging low over the water, the kind that makes everything feel half real. I'd heard stories all my life, about the explosions, the lost soldiers, and the whispers that travel across the island when the wind picks up, but seeing it with my own eyes was different. It felt alive, even though everything about it screamed decay. I reached the island by a small rented boat, the oars creaking with every pull. The castle walls looked broken yet proud, the stone carved with strange patterns of time and fire. When I stepped onto the island, the air felt heavier, like it carried the memories of those who once worked here. It wasn't just silence, it was the kind of silence that listens back. They say the man who built this place, Francis Bannerman, stored weapons here, cannons, rifles, even gunpowder from old wars. He wanted it to be a fortress, his legacy. But in 1920, something went terribly wrong. A mysterious explosion ripped through the armory, tearing apart the walls and shaking the Hudson Valley awake. Some say it was an accident. Others whisper it was punishment. When I walked near the collapsed structure, I could almost hear the echo of that blast in the wind. I found the remains of a stone staircase leading nowhere. Each step was covered with moss, cracked from age. As I climbed, I caught myself wondering what the workers must have felt, living on this lonely island surrounded by death and dynamite. Did they sense what was coming? At the top, where the castle's windows once stood, I looked out over the Hudson. The sun was setting, painting the river gold. For a moment, it felt peaceful, until I heard it. A faint metallic clink, like someone dropping a chain inside the ruins. I froze. The sound came again, softer this time, followed by what I swear was a voice. It wasn't clear enough to understand, but it carried weight, like a man trying to say something from the other side of time. My flashlight flickered. The air grew colder. I wanted to believe it was just the wind, or maybe an animal, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The voice seemed to move closer, circling the empty hallways of stone. I didn't run. I just stood there, listening, my heart racing so loud it almost drowned out the sound. When I finally left the island, the fog had returned, wrapping the castle in silence again. From my boat, I looked back one last time. The broken walls stood against the fading light, proud and haunted. I don't know if Bannerman Castle is truly cursed, but I know this, the island remembers. And if you stay long enough, it will remember you too. 2. Saratoga County Homestead, the hospital that breathes fear. I remember the day I drove deep into the woods of Saratoga County, chasing a story that most locals refused to talk about. The road was narrow and cracked, swallowed by tall trees that blocked the sun. My GPS kept losing signal, but I didn't need it anymore. Even before I reached the old Saratoga County homestead, I could feel it. That strange heaviness in the air, the kind that tells you you're close to something that doesn't want to be found. When I finally saw it, I stopped breathing for a second. The massive brick hospital stood on a hill, its windows shattered, the front door hanging loose like it was waiting for someone foolish enough to enter. I stepped out of my car, and the only sound was the crunch of dry leaves under my boots. Every local I'd spoken to had warned me, don't stay there after sunset. The building breathes. I thought it was just a story. But the moment I stepped inside, the air actually shifted, as if the walls themselves exhaled. The first hallway was lined with peeling paint and broken gurneys. Faded medical charts still clung to the walls, and I swear I could smell old disinfectant mixed with dust and rust. My flashlight beam caught the remains of a hospital bed, its mattress torn open, metal frame bent as if someone had tried to escape it. The silence was unreal. No birds, no wind, nothing. And then I heard it, a slow dragging sound from the upper floor. I told myself it must be an animal, maybe a raccoon, but every step I took closer made that dragging louder, heavier, like someone was moving a stretcher across the floor. When I reached the staircase, the sound stopped completely. My pulse was racing, but curiosity pulled me up those stairs. The air grew colder the higher I climbed. The second floor looked worse. Rusted doors, shattered glass, and walls scribbled with strange graffiti. I walked into what used to be a patient ward. The floor was covered in old newspapers, some dated back to the 1930s. That's when I felt it, a breath. Not wind. A deep, human breath right behind me. I turned fast, nothing. But the air was warm against my neck, like someone had been standing too close. I left that room fast, but as I passed another doorway, I caught a glimpse of something in the dark, a faint figure in white standing near the end of the hall. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and when the beam steadied, the figure was gone. I could still hear a faint echo of coughing, like someone struggling for air. I didn't run until I reached the main entrance. The moment I stepped outside, the cold wind hit my face, and I realized I had been sweating. The building behind me stood silent again, pretending to be nothing more than bricks and shadows. But as I looked back one last time, one of the upper windows slammed shut, even though there was no wind. That was the moment I believed what the locals said, the hospital breathes fear, and sometimes, it breathes you in too, 3 Letchworth Village, the asylum of forgotten souls. I still remember the first time I walked through the gates of Letchworth Village. The air there felt strange, heavy, like it was soaked in memories that refused to die. The front gate was rusted, half open, creaking slowly in the wind. The place looked endless, rows of decaying brick buildings covered in vines and silence. I'd seen pictures online before, but standing there in person felt completely different. It wasn't just an abandoned asylum, it was a place that still remembered pain. As I stepped onto the cracked pathway, my shoes crunched over broken glass. Somewhere far off, a door slammed, though I was sure I was alone. Every window I passed seemed to watch me, the shadows inside shifting ever so slightly when I looked too long. My camera was in my hand, but for a few minutes, I forgot to even use it. Something about that place demanded silence, like walking through a graveyard that could still hear you. Inside one of the old wards, the smell hit me, mildew, rust, and something faintly metallic, almost like blood. The paint peeled off in long strips, and children's drawings were still faintly visible on the walls, stick figures, suns, and words that time had half erased. I stopped near a small room with an iron bed still bolted to the floor. The mattress was gone, but the marks of where restraints once were still visible. I just stood there, imagining the children who were kept here, those who were called unfit, those who were forgotten. I turned to leave when I heard something, soft footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I spun around. No one. The hallway stretched empty, my flashlight beam trembling across it. Then I saw it, a reflection in a window. A figure, small and thin, standing right behind me. My heart froze. I turned around fast, but the room was empty. The only sound was the dripping water from a pipe above. Trying to shake it off, I walked toward the next building, the morgue. The door creaked open as if it had been waiting. Inside, the air was colder, too cold for autumn. My breath came out in faint clouds. Old autopsy tables stood covered in dust, and on one of them lay an old doll, one glass eye missing. I don't know why, but it felt like someone had placed it there recently. The air started to buzz, a low hum, like electricity, but the power here had been cut for decades. That's when I heard it. A whisper, clear, close, and soft. A child's voice. "Don't forget us." It came from right beside my ear. I swear I felt the warmth of a breath. I dropped my flashlight, and the light rolled across the floor, catching a glimpse of small handprints smeared into the dust near my feet. I backed out of the room, shaking, every step echoing louder than it should. When I finally stepped outside, the sun had dipped low behind the trees, and Letchworth looked almost peaceful again. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I saw. As I reached my car, I looked back one last time, and in one of the windows, I saw that same small figure, just standing there, watching. The asylum of forgotten souls had remembered me. For Split Rock Quarry, the explosion that never ended. I still remember the evening I first went to Split Rock Quarry near Onondaga. The locals had warned me not to stay there after sunset, but I've never been the type to walk away from a mystery. The road leading to the site was rough, almost hidden by overgrown trees, and the air smelled faintly of burnt stone. I parked my car near the old trail and started walking toward what was left of the quarry. The sun was low, the light turning orange and soft, and for a moment the whole place looked peaceful. But that peace didn't last long. As I walked deeper in, the silence grew heavier. The rocks around me were scarred, blackened, and sharp, like they still carried the memory of the explosion that happened more than a century ago. Back in 1918, a massive TNT blast had killed over 50 workers instantly. Some bodies were never found, others were buried right there, beneath the rubble. People say that's why this place never rests. I found what looked like the remains of the old crusher building, huge slabs of concrete half buried in the ground, metal rods twisted like paper. My flashlight caught something strange on one of the walls, handprints, small ones, almost burned into the stone. I touched the surface, it was warm. The air around me started to hum, a low vibration I could feel in my chest. Then, out of nowhere, I smelled smoke. Not the faint kind, but thick and strong, like dynamite right before it explodes. I turned around, expecting to see someone, maybe another explorer, but there was no one. The air shimmered, and for a split second, I thought I saw figures, men in dusty clothes, carrying tools, their faces blackened with soot. One of them looked straight at me. His eyes were wide, empty, and then he vanished in the haze. My heart raced. I kept telling myself it was just the fading sunlight playing tricks, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. A loud clang broke the silence, a metal chain hitting stone, echoing across the quarry. I spun around, my flashlight shaking, trying to find the source. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a distant, muffled scream that rose and faded into the wind. The smell of smoke thickened, burning my throat. I stumbled backward, tripping over a rock, and fell hard onto the dirt. For a moment, everything went silent again. When I finally stood up, the smoke was gone, but a thin mist had crept over the quarry. It felt cold now, unnaturally cold. I turned toward the path to leave, but before I took a step, I heard a whisper, barely audible, carried by the wind. "We never left." I froze. The voice sounded broken, like it came from deep underground. I didn't look back. I just walked fast, then ran, until I reached my car. As I drove away, I glanced in the mirror and saw something flicker in the darkness, tiny orange sparks rising from the quarry floor, just like embers. Maybe it was the wind. Or maybe, somewhere beneath those rocks, the explosion never really ended. 5 Durham Valley, the village swallowed by silence. It was late October when I drove into Durham Valley, a quiet, forgotten corner of Greene County, New York. The GPS had already lost signal miles before I reached the valley, and the road had turned into a thin ribbon of cracked asphalt swallowed by fallen leaves. The sun was sinking behind the hills, painting everything gold, but there was something about the silence that made my chest tighten. It wasn't peaceful, it was hollow, like the land itself had stopped breathing. I had heard stories about this place from an old man I met at a gas station earlier that day. He told me that valley used to be alive, mills, farms, a church, even a school. But something happened, and people just stopped staying. When I asked him what he meant, he only said, "The valley takes back what belongs to it," and walked away. I thought he was joking, until I got there. The first thing I noticed were the houses, or what was left of them. Wooden frames half buried in the ground, roofs caved in, doors missing. The forest had swallowed the town, trees grew right through living rooms and porches. I stopped near what looked like an old farmhouse and decided to take a look inside. The front steps groaned under my weight. Inside, the floor was covered in dry leaves and shattered glass. An old chair lay overturned, a children's shoe beside it. I picked it up, dusted it off. It couldn't have been there for more than a few years. But there was no sign of anyone living here. I walked toward the back room, and that's when I heard it. Soft humming. A woman's voice, low and distant. My heart jumped. I froze, listening. The melody was old, almost like a lullaby, drifting through the house from somewhere deep in the woods behind it. I stepped outside again, trying to locate the sound, but it faded as soon as I did. The forest went dead quiet. Not a bird, not a breeze. I followed the faint path downhill until I reached the old mill. The wheel was still standing, but blackened by rot. The air here felt colder, damp, and strange. I took out my phone to record, but the screen wouldn't turn on. The humming started again, closer this time, and suddenly I felt a chill run down my neck, as if someone was standing right behind me, breathing. I turned fast. No one. But the air smelled faintly of smoke, and I saw footprints, bare, small ones, leading away from the mill toward the valley floor. I followed them only for a few steps before I stopped. Because ahead of me, the fog had thickened, curling between the trees, and in that fog, I saw shapes, like people walking slowly, silently. Farmers, women, children. They didn't look ghostly, they looked real, but faded, like memories repeating themselves. And then, just as suddenly, they were gone. I didn't wait to see more. I ran back to my car and didn't stop until I was out of that valley. As I drove off, I looked in the mirror one last time. The fog had cleared, and the valley looked empty again, calm and lifeless. But I swear, for a second, I saw someone standing by the road, a woman in an old dress, watching me leave. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear what she said. Maybe it was just the wind. Or maybe Durham Valley really does remember those it has already taken.